我只想一直守护你身旁，我只想一直守护你身旁，我只想守护着你到永远，到永远。
The trial. Arraignment. Once you've been taken to jail, it's time for your arraignment, when formal charges are brought against you in front of a judge of some kind, often called a magistrate. Normally, you have a right to this hearing within 24 hours of your arrest, but as a practical matter, getting arrested on the weekends can extend the wait 2 or 3 days. It also makes a lot of difference where you're arrested. Big cities run court sessions all night long. The important thing is that you have an attorney, now. Ideally, you've already lined one up for just such an occasion, but we'll assume for the moment you didn't. You need a lawyer. First, you must have a criminal lawyer. You can forget your family's tax and estate attorney. If he takes the case, you're sure to go to jail. However, he may be able to recommend a criminal lawyer for you. But it cannot be stressed enough that you need a lawyer who is a criminal defense attorney, and nothing else. Criminal law and civil law are very different from one another in procedure, methods of proof, and everything else. And the stakes are so much higher in criminal court that you cannot have half-assed representation. It almost goes without saying that it's far easier to pick a lawyer and prepare your defense from outside jail. Although it's possible to do all of it behind bars, you're subjected to all kinds of obstacles, and you are essentially helpless. In this case, you can improve your lot by having a trusted person on the outside help you out. Best of all is a family member or a close friend who has nothing to do with the case. You must insist that the lawyer come visit you immediately. Even if you are fortunate enough to have trusted people on the outside to do this for you, you need to see your lawyer in person. That way you'll know for sure what's going on, and won't feel so helpless. Criminal lawyers are only about 3% of all the lawyers out there, and of those few, probably 80% are either just scraping by or worse. Even the ones making a living off it are not doing too well. Yes, there are high-priced, high-profile defense lawyers out there, but you won't get that guy. Luckily, there really are a lot of good court-appointed defense attorneys. However, in your present circumstance, you'll have to choose quickly from little information. There is one important thing to keep in mind when hiring a lawyer that may seem obvious, but bears noting. Make fucking sure you are the one paying the lawyer. If your pal Luigi says he's taking pity on you and has decided to provide you with his own personal lawyer and will pick up the tab, you must refuse. First, because even the lawyer knows it's not truly ethical, and mainly because if the lawyer is being paid by Luigi, that's who he works for, and not you. You and your pal Luigi might have very different ideas about what would be a successful outcome to your case. Your lawyer should be just that, your lawyer. How to pick a lawyer. Look for experience and training. Contrary to popular belief, state-provided attorneys from the public defender's office are generally the best you can get. They have often got many times the training the prosecutor has, and have clocked more hours in court. Your prosecutor could easily be a total rookie, since this is one of the first jobs law school grads can get, and the pay is not too bad. Your attorney may have even worked for the prosecutor's office at one time. This can be good, but it is not necessary at all, and you should watch it if the guy harps too much on his knowledge of the system gained from being a prosecutor. If he was a prosecutor for very long at all, his mind is likely warped by the experience. He'll make you think he's working hard for you, but his sympathies are elsewhere, and his concern for you is low. The public defender is local, and also knows the judges, secretaries, and other people who can really do things. He may even intimidate the prosecutor by virtue of just being around so long and knowing everybody. He doesn't need to be high-priced or famous either. In fact, revving up the profile of your case may be the last thing you want. A good local boy with solid experience getting people out to the hands of the criminal justice system is what you need. So, your public defender's office is a fine place to look for a lawyer. He's only got one real problem. He's impoverished. Unlike the prosecutor, the state pays him less, gives him more work, and fewer hours to do it in, which does tend to overburden him. But all public defenders are up for grabs as private attorneys as well, and may depend on this outside income for their bread and butter. Don't scrimp on your lawyer. Your life may literally depend on this guy, and what he does in the next few days can make the difference between going home that night or heading for the state penitentiary in a bus with wire mesh over the windows. He'll tell you his price, and you pay it if you can at all afford it. But don't get carried away. There's no point in offering him any kind of bonus for anything. Telling him you'll double his price if he wins may tempt him to throw caution to the wind and go for broke. Remember, in the end, if he loses, you go to jail. But if you're broke, you still have the right to an attorney, and he or she will be coming from the public defender's office anyway. In fact, it might be to your advantage to go indignant. That way, the lawyer's free. So you get someone who's connected with the PD's office. If you can, try for a younger guy. A young guy has more energy to devote to your case, is less jaded, and less likely to take an assembly line attitude toward his work. He's more likely to fight. It's also easier to assess him. Older guys can all seem pretty confident due to their jadedness. It may also be easier to relate to a younger guy. By the way, it is not necessary to tell him everything, until you get a better feel for the dude. Be careful what you say to him. He may sell you out, or even make it worse for you. There are two schools of thought on the matter. Lawyers will tell you to never lie to your attorney, and to reveal as much information as possible, so they'll have the most to work with. And they've got a valid point. On the other hand, you may accidentally skew things by telling things that don't really matter and give him the wrong impression. You might piss him off, or otherwise negatively impress him. So, he'll be happy to pocket your money and send your ass to prison. It's true that whatever you tell your lawyer is privileged information, and they're not supposed to reveal it, but don't rely on this. Unfortunately, there's no good rule here. It's generally a bad idea to lie or withhold information, but at this point, details are not as crucial. At this point, you need that lawyer to get these charges dropped and show you a way out of the machine. Perhaps the most important thing to keep in mind about your attorney is that you bear the responsibility for your defense. You must govern and control the relationship. Have your lawyer provide you with copies of all paperwork he files, and brief you and keep you informed on all meetings or contacts he might make relating to your case. If you're stuck in jail, this is even more important. If you're in jail, you must write and call your lawyer constantly. Not to harass him, but simply to show you have an active interest. If you don't have an active interest in your case, you can bet he won't. Like everybody else, attorneys are lazy. It's to their advantage to hit you up for their fee, then get you to plead, thereby saving them the work of defending you. They may even use some of the scare tactics used by police to make you think you're facing a worse situation than you really are, so that the plea bargain they offer seems like a better deal. More on pleading later. Make sure your lawyer demonstrates his interest. He should at least come visit you before your hearing, for instance. You must feel satisfied that he or she is doing their best for you. If not, fire them and get another attorney. You have a right to do this at any time. At the same time, don't become a nagging asshole. You must work as a team. The hearing. Once you've been caught in the maw of the machine, It is important to mitigate early to minimize the damage. Your preliminary hearing is the place to do this, and your lawyer is the best one to do it. Have him thoroughly check all police work connecting to the case, the warrant, the circumstances surrounding your arrest, everything. Cops, in their eagerness to make a bust, often break the law. Prosecutors include things that have no bearing on your case, just to make you look worse. In federal cases, things like that are explicitly used to determine how bad your offense is. For federal purposes, the quote-unquote abuse of trust bumps you up on the offense chart. A doctor who sells drugs is worse than a plumber who does the same. So having shit thrown at you like that can be seriously damaging. But errors like that must be discovered and corrected quickly. All too often a guy doesn't realize there was some major flaw in the state's case against him, until it's discovered years later by a jailhouse lawyer or his own research. And, while the discovery may very well lead to your release, you may end up sitting in prison for 5 years when you could have walked on the very first day. Worse, to combat the quote-unquote problem of appeals and other forms of due process, some states are adopting laws making it increasingly difficult to introduce new evidence once a verdict has been initially reached. Your preliminary hearing is the place where a lot of pain can be avoided. Take advantage of it. This is the first place the charges stick or not. The preliminary hearing is where the judge gets to hear the prosecutor explain what crimes you've committed, and has to decide whether you can be prosecuted for them or not. Here's where your lawyer should get a lot of the charges against you dropped, especially those crimes you did not commit. To get you prosecuted, the state must show that you fulfilled certain quote-unquote elements of a particular crime. For instance, one of the elements of burglary is that you must have been inside the house. Now, if the cops got to you outside as you were lurking around, that's not enough to charge you with burglary, since you didn't meet an essential element of the crime. The prosecutor. If there is any one monster in the machine who is truly out to screw you, it is the prosecutor. It is his or her job to crucify you. The prosecutor does not care at all about you, or fairness, or anything else. All of the most vile elements of a policeman and a politician are concentrated in him. This person is your archest and most dangerous enemy, and has the power to legally inflict all kinds of sadistic shit on you with a few strokes of a pen. This is no exaggeration. Even the meanest judge might bother to listen to your side, but never the prosecutor. He or she will stop at nothing to ensure the worst for you. Prosecutors hang out with cops, and are likely to participate in the corruption and abominations those guys commit. Small-town prosecutors might even mosey down to the jailhouse to taunt you, or participate in beating you. They are truly merciless. Treat the prosecutor as if he were a bird of prey. Many animals avoid being eaten by predators by looking skinny and bad-tasting. Follow their lead. Do your best to look skinny and bad-tasting. Do not antagonize this person. Act humble as hell in his presence. Act fucking scared. You shouldn't have any trouble doing this, because rest assured, he wants and intends to hurt you. His effectiveness and his livelihood are measured by the number of people he hurts and the severity of the pain he inflicts. All you want to do, or can do, at this moment is minimize that pain. A three-pronged fork. At the time of arraignment, the prosecutor can do one of three things: forego prosecution, prosecute you, or refer it to a grand jury. The grand jury is often used when a prosecutor, for some political reason, cannot avoid prosecuting a case he would prefer to ignore. A good example is when a cop kills an innocent person, or the city's richest citizen gets caught doing some crime. Then he can take it to the grand jury and get them to issue the indictment and blame the prosecution on them. In fact, It is true that a prosecutor could, quote-unquote, get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if he wanted to. The trial is held in secret. All evidence is picked by the prosecutor, and all the witnesses are compelled to testify. No Fifth Amendment here. Originally, the grand jury was supposed to be a way for the citizenry to protect itself against some maniac prosecutor by making sure that a jury of your peers thought that you were a scumbag first. This system has been perverted into a game in which a group of quote-unquote solid citizens routinely okay a prosecutor's wish, while acting as his scapegoat should he fail to win the case. The mind of the prosecutor. Prosecutors are interested in two things: a confession and evidence. If you followed instructions so far, you haven't given anything like a confession. Now, it's up to your lawyer to suppress any evidence. Sometimes you can do a good enough job of convincing the prosecutor that there isn't much evidence, that you'll look skinny and bad-tasting, and he'll spit you out right there and just forgo the prosecution. Same goes if the prosecutor feels he's gotten a hold of some prey that may fight back. Your lawyer, your behavior, your looks, everything must convey to him that you will not go cleanly or easily to trial, that you will fight him every step of the way, and that you are capable of it. Let him know you'll be filing motions left and right, and that even if he gets a conviction, you're the type who can get it overturned. You are but one of scores of guys the prosecutor is going to screw that day, so it's not so hard to convince him that there are easier meals than you. Another important thing to communicate to him is that your case may very well have quote-unquote overtones, be they racial, sexual, or anything else. Remember how that cop wouldn't let you bring your Bible to jail? Cops screwing up at the scene, especially by shooting uninvolved people or setting a house on fire with tear gas canisters, are a good thing to have on your side. It looks horrible in court. More than once the state has prosecuted a man and ended up defending itself and losing against a hellacious lawsuit because of cop misbehavior. Sometimes prosecutors are stupid enough to charge you with a crime you clearly didn't commit, and the charge is thrown out by the judge. But prosecutors never just charge you with one thing. Along with any main charge will be things like disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and the like, and it is a virtual certainty that the judge will find enough prima facie evidence to allow you to be charged with something. Your attorney's first duty is to bust down as many charges as possible, so that you face the least of them. You absolutely need a lawyer to do this. Legal training is necessary, since it is essentially the charge, and not you, that is on trial before the court. That means your quote-unquote alibi isn't of much use here. Alibis and the like are what is known as quote-unquote positive defense, and that's not considered here. All that counts now is that the charges look proper. To defend you, your lawyer must show that your case doesn't fit the legal definition of the charge. There are lots of ways to do this, but your lawyer is the one to do it. This is your first chance to cross-examine the cops, and the whole thing should be recorded by a court reporter, or at the very least recorded on tape. Cops can easily change their testimonies later, and you may need to refute them. If your lawyer can't get a charge thrown out, he might at least offer mitigating evidence to show quote-unquote diminished capacity, and get the prosecutor to drop the charge. Drunkenness, emotional states, and other circumstances can serve as a defense here to get the charge, quote-unquote, decriminalized. Instead of attempted burglary, you could become a glue sniffer in need of treatment. You can have felonies reduced to misdemeanors, misdemeanors to infractions. The main thing is to whittle the charges down to something simple, something a jury can understand, something you can defend against. Far better to be charged with theft than criminal conversion. The latter might not make much sense to the jury. Same thing goes for any other gobbledygook kind of crime, like stalking, or conspiracy, or doing anything with intent. Vague charges are easier to prove, since nobody's quite sure what the hell it is. In any event, you're probably not getting out of all the charges. So, it's on to the next step. Before the trial. First offense. If your attorney is successful in reducing the number of charges against you, he may also be able to get you into one of the many pre-trial diversion programs in operation all over the country. These programs vary in details, but are basically a way to speed things up and lighten the caseload, as they all work in similar ways. In exchange for you doing some sort of penance thing, the state will agree to not press charges. And, if you stay cool for 6 months, or a year after that, they'll even expunge the whole thing from your record. The last part is important, because it means you'll have a clean record the next time you get popped, and you'll be afforded all the benefits any other, quote-unquote, first-timer gets. In this way, it's possible to get nailed for 2 or 3 crimes before anybody starts to notice. It's not always automatic, though, so don't forget to apply for the expungement later on. You never want this charge to show up in front of a judge again. Too many guys are doing, quote-unquote, enhanced sentences because they blew off cleaning up their records and got years of time for being habitual or career criminals, when they could have been treated like a first offender. Being a first-time offender is really important. Judges are often very lenient, and so are prosecutors. The next most important thing is to have a job. If you don't have a job when you get arrested, make sure you have one by the time you get to this hearing. It's more important than being married, having kids, or any other of that quote-unquote responsible citizen shit. If your lawyer can argue that the local economy might be slightly disrupted by your being sent to jail, he has an effective tool. Other things at your disposal might be the fact that you've already spent a couple of days in jail because of this, that certain people are dependent on you, but mainly, you have a job. That says you're accepted by society, and there's a good chance you won't act up again. So the judge will make you go to an alcohol treatment program or perform some community service, and you twist your necktie and thank him profusely. Then, get the hell out of there, do your stint in the county dog pound, clean up your record, and stay free. The plea. If you end up having to go to trial, your lawyer will be able to file for, quote-unquote, discovery, and you'll get a look at just what the state has against you. You can start to assess what your chances would be at a trial. Now is the time to consider coming clean with your attorney, and also to assess him. If he doesn't seem competent, then request another. The plea bargain is what keeps the courts going at all. Without them, the quote-unquote justice system would jam up in one day. There is no way that each person charged with a crime in the U.S. could have even 1 minute of court time if the majority of people accused of something by the state didn't agree on a quote-unquote plea bargain. In exchange for a reduced punishment, the accused agrees to help the state save money and time on due process. That way, the prosecutor gets to chalk up another in the win column, and you don't suffer as much. Even if you are innocent, a plea bargain is something to consider, especially if it keeps you out of jail. And that, not justice, is the goal here. If you are guilty and you feel the state has got you cold, then consider a plea bargain even more seriously. It could make the difference of years in a cage. The plea offer comes from the prosecutor, often transmitted through your own lawyer, and reflects just how strong he or she thinks the case against you is. If they have a lot of evidence and witnesses, they may offer only a token amount of time off in a sentence in exchange for a guilty plea. If it's weak, you'll see that too, in the form of a much better deal. Typically, the state will take their list of charges. Robbing a store can be broken into robbery, a weapons charge of some kind, confinement for each person in the store, fleeing the scene, resisting arrest, etc., which together could send you away for 100 years, and offer to let you plead guilty to just one charge and take whatever punishment that entails. You can counteroffer too, and once you come to an agreement on what you'll plead guilty to, and the punishment, then you go play out the scenario in front of the judge. However, the judge is not bound by the agreement, and is free to sentence you however he wants. In practice, the judge normally goes along. Mitigating and aggravating circumstances. Whether you should take the offer or not depends heavily on your exact situation. Too many factors are involved to give general advice here. Everything counts. Whether you're in a rural or urban setting, your race, your ties to the community, even the temperature, all make a difference. In most cases, if you're facing 2 years or less, you can expect to serve that time at a local jail. If it's longer than that, you'll be sent to a prison in a part of the state where conditions may be worse. Thus, if a prosecutor offers 30 months, it may be worth it to counter with an offer for 22, so you can stay in town. Oftentimes, the prosecutor can make sure you get sent to a particular prison or jail, and that could influence your decision. Other things to consider are some of the things used to, quote-unquote, enhance your sentence. Typically, these quote-unquote aggravating circumstances are doing things like using a gun in your crime, doing it near a school or park, introducing co-conspirators, selling dope to minors, and so on. Many of these are statutory, but you and your lawyer must decide if they pose a real threat. For example, quote-unquote use of a gun. Just having a gun in the glove compartment while you sell drugs is use of a gun during a crime. If you trade a gun for contraband, or accept one as payment, that's use. As more and more oppressive laws aimed at disarming the population come into effect, more permutations of this will be possible. For instance, if you have Grandpa's old shotgun in the basement while you sell untaxed cigarettes upstairs, that probably won't stand up as use of a gun, although they'll threaten you with it. But if it's an AK-47, or has a banana clip, or just looks like one of those guns the media is demonizing, it may very well stick. Sometimes, you'll be threatened with a gun enhancement if someone connected to you in the crime had a gun at home. This is another case where it probably won't stick, at least as of this writing. Another thing you must see before you decide to plead is any kind of pre-sentence report or investigation. This thing will typically be full of errors that must be corrected. In federal cases, you have a right to review this report for at least 10 days before sentencing. If your lawyer does not get around to showing it to you, then you object to it at sentencing and demand your 10 days, not a minute less. They may try to give you a half hour in the hallway to check it over, but that's not enough. You are entitled to 10 days, and you will get it, if you insist. More on pre-sentence reports later. Plea bargaining is something you should take under reasoned advisement with your attorney, something you must think about very carefully. Don't jump on anything, even if you're pressed. Especially, don't allow anyone, not even your lawyer, to scare you by telling you you're facing a possible 100 years if you get convicted of the whole string of charges, and if you have to serve all the sentences consecutively. Although that's possible in theory, it isn't likely. If the only bargain you get offered is to have a few minor charges dropped, that's not much of a bargain. You have to weigh the offer against what is likely to happen, not what could conceivably happen. Think carefully. Think carefully, because the carrot of a lighter sentence is balanced by an enormous stick. Sometimes, like the police, the prosecutor will threaten to hit you with charges he or she knows aren't true, but will get you a lifetime in prison if he succeeds. It is a sick game indeed, especially if you're innocent. Failing to plead and forcing the state to go to trial means they will come down very hard on you if you lose. You'll be sure to get the maximum punishment possible if you are found guilty. So keep this in mind if your attorney urges you to go for it, and we can beat it. If he's wrong, it's you who goes to prison. He just goes home with an even bigger wad of money than he would have made from a plea bargain. On the other hand, It's not a guaranteed win for the state, and should the trial go in your favor, you go free. As discussed above, your lawyer may be biased in favor of pleading just to avoid the work involved. The best protection against this is to know what the likely sentence really is. Sometimes, as in federal cases, this is pretty easy. Since 1987, all federal penalties have been standardized by Congress. Judges are bound by these guidelines and have almost no latitude to go above or below them. Figuring out your sentence for you is as easy as it is for the judge. A system of points assigned for every aspect of your crime determines your sentence, and even the type of prison you'll go to. A lot of states have mandatory sentence laws too, especially for drug crimes. All of the sentencing guidelines are published and publicly available. Anyone with more than 2 weeks of law school can find them for you. Your criminal lawyer will be able to interpret them for you. One thing to remember is that indeterminate sentences, such as 2 to 12 years, mean very little if there is a mandatory 10 years for a crime. If the minimum mandatory sentence is 5 years, then you're really looking at 5 to 12. A plea that gets you 8 might not be so good then. If you're a first-time offender, or have other mitigating circumstances, then you'll probably only get 5 anyway. And be especially wary if the prosecutor offers you a quote-unquote deal wherein he lowers the minimum in an indeterminate sentence plea. Maybe instead of 5 to 8, he says he'll ask for 0 to 10. Remember, the sentence minimums remain in effect. If the minimum is 5, then 5 is the least you can get. To be a legitimate offer, he's got to offer a reduction in the maximum sentence. A plea should get you something. You're agreeing to trade some of your freedom to save the state money and hassle. Get something for it. Rolling over. Just as at the police station, the prosecutor may also give you the chance to snitch on your friends, or to otherwise help them go after someone else. Like any other offer, it will reflect just how badly they want you to snitch, though your reward will be commensurate with the quality of information you give, and there's no guarantee of anything once you've sold out. Don't do it. If you testify against someone or help the police entrap someone else, your days are numbered. Once you have allowed yourself to be used by the police/prosecutor, they will throw you to the wolves. There's a strong possibility that the police will say your information was of no use and hit you for the maximum anyway. If there is a mandatory sentence in effect, and they don't lower the charges against you, there's no way for them to deal with you regardless. Informing, or otherwise helping the prosecutor, is a stupid idea. Even if they really could get you a better deal, you don't want to become an informer. Informers are the most hated people in the world. Even the cops think informers are scum. Prisoners absolutely loathe snitches. If you're in prison, there will be nothing you can do to prevent being raped, brutalized, tortured, and killed. Even if you are set free, you will not sleep soundly ever again. Once identified as a snitch, there is no way to get out of it. No apology can ever be sufficient, and you will be hunted down. Quote-unquote protective custody in prison won't do you a bit of good. Even the most sophisticated witness relocation programs might buy you a little time, but cannot protect you forever. Don't become a snitch, and don't listen to anyone who advises you to do it. On the other hand, every criminal defendant has something to sell. He may not be aware of it, but he does. You may not have to turn in your buddies. You may only have to furnish some specific information the prosecutor is interested in, and which you won't end up betraying anyone with. Maybe you know, just by living in the neighborhood, about certain things the cops wish they knew. What are some of the signals used by drug dealers in your neighborhood? How exactly is a certain scam being run? The state might also want you to help them in some other way. Perhaps they want you to take the rap for some other crime that's not as bad, but for some reason they want it disposed of. In any event, if you hang out with criminal elements, you may very well be in a position to trade information for freedom. Some prosecutors don't care much about quality. They want 5 names. So, you give them 5 names of your enemies. Some prosecutors might even let you back out on the street, where you can go find some people, perhaps rivals, to turn in. Some are not this dumb. They say everyone has his price, and prosecutors will tell you that sooner or later, everybody but everybody informs. Some people agree to inform, and then back out later when they realize what they're doing. Some crack right away. The trick is to give the cops information they already have, is no good, or will not make you a hunted man. If you've been nailed in some kind of high-level embezzling scheme, the prosecutor and the company may ask that you reveal your methods in exchange for less harsh treatment. Hell, you might happen to know the layout of a certain house in your neighborhood. You might be able to identify somebody you don't even know. Then again, you might have some property they want. You could easily trade this for something. This can happen either as an asset forfeiture, described below, or just by revealing where you have hidden something valuable. But once again, selling out a live human being who has a chance to get at you, ever, is a stupid idea. By the way, this is one reason Luigi has so kindly provided you with his slick attorney. Part of his job is to see that you don't make any deals involving Luigi's hide. You need rehabilitating. Just as we saw at the preliminary hearing, other things that can help minimize chances of incarceration or reduce your sentence even if found guilty at a trial are having a job, distinguished military record, well-known surname, family support, community or church support, no criminal past, and, of course, having drug or drinking problems. The beauty of being a dope fiend or a drunk is that the court gets to sentence you to rehabilitation instead of prison. It is far better to be convicted of being a low-down drunk who steals than to do time for burglary. Make sure your lawyer considers this angle, to blame your crime on drugs or drink, and then let the state, quote-unquote, save you. Of course, there is also remorse if you plead or get found guilty. If you can't get off by presenting yourself as a human garbage can, then at least let the world know how sorry you are. Abase yourself. Never smirk at anyone. Do not laugh at your trial. Don't smirk or laugh if you're playing innocent either. And for God's sake, don't cry. Crying is remorse, and that means you're guilty. Just express worry and shock. And never, never, never throw yourself on the mercy of the court. The bribe. At this point, it is also possible to pay off various people and make a deal to essentially buy your way out of the machine. This doesn't have to be in the form of a classic bribe, where a judge gets a plain envelope of cash and you get acquitted. In reality, these deals are hard to initiate and extremely dangerous for all concerned. Although your lawyer may be able to set this up for you, this type of payoff is restricted to mafia types, who also have the time-tested threat of assassination, etc., to back them up. And if your case is highly publicized, a judge would be committing political suicide to go easy on you. If your case is not so public, you may be able to swing one of those deals, where the policeman's orphan fund suddenly gets a large anonymous donation, Or the prosecutor's nephew lucks into a brand new job at the company you own, or any of 1,000 permutations on this type of quote-unquote understanding. Needless to say, you have to be rich to pull this off. Luckily, in a perverse way, the bribe, as we all know and love it, has been institutionalized to allow even the little guy the chance to pay a guard and scramble free. Especially for smaller offenses, prosecutors will openly solicit funds for the policeman's orphan fund in exchange for not prosecuting you. But this kind of thing is confined to smaller offenses. If the crime is more serious, however, there is still a chance for you to buy your way out of it. This type of bribery is known as asset forfeiture, and it has bought thousands of people their freedom. Asset forfeiture. Asset forfeiture has made it possible for a guy to buy freedom by striking an unwritten agreement with the prosecutor that he will not complain when the state takes possession of some or all of his property. If the state promises to reduce the penalty or even forget the whole thing. In practical terms, the seized property need not be too expensive at all. A car or a computer might be plenty enough. Sometimes a used CB radio is sufficient. Anything with resale value can be fenced to the state in exchange for a lighter sentence. This is possible because it is the police departments themselves that benefit directly from seized goods. So does the prosecutor. Sometimes a prosecutor's entire income is dependent on the amount he can squeeze out of people the state has accused of a crime. So you can guess where he is coming from. As an example, there is one large city in the U.S. where a single attorney handles all of the asset forfeiture cases on behalf of that city's county and 11 other surrounding counties in the state. This is a busy man. He is also a very rich man, since he is paid a percentage of the assets he is able to seize for the state. Yes, it's raw extortion, but it must be handled carefully nonetheless. Offer your custom van too early, and the prosecutor might even act offended that you'd think of such a thing. Offer too late, and it's too late. Here is yet another reason to have a local criminal defense attorney who knows each prosecutor's quirks. Asset forfeiture makes it possible for the state to take away your property, as long as they allege it was somehow, even tenuously, involved with a crime. You have the option to fight for it and get it back, but it's a losing proposition. Even if the case is dismissed, they can keep your property. Even if you successfully sue to retrieve it, you still have to pay the storage bills. Sometimes, the grab can be even easier. Cops in airports especially are always sniffing around for someone with lots of cash on them. One of the first cases of a state airport mugging was the case of Roger Liukonen in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. When cops there relieved him of nearly $15,000 in cash, not arresting him either, he sued to get it back, spending $7,000 on lawyer's fees. In the end, he had to settle for a portion of it, as further litigation would have been even more draining. Even in the heartland, police stopped a woman in the Indianapolis airport, took $35,000 in cash they found on her, and didn't even bother to make an arrest. Since 1980, some fundamental and startling changes have been made in state law that have made property seizure from criminal suspects a true billion-dollar industry. Under a host of laws purporting to strip gangsters of their ill-gotten gains, a suspect can now be deprived on the spot of his money, house, car, bass boat, or anything else he owns if a cop has, quote-unquote, probable cause to believe the assets were gained, or used, or intended to be used, in the commission of a crime. That crime can range from premeditated murder to possession of rolling papers, from kidnapping to jaywalking. If you do it twice, it can be deemed racketeering, subjecting even more property to forfeiture. Furthermore, the state does not need to convict, charge, or even arrest a suspect to seize his assets. To get them back, the suspect has to prove, to the satisfaction of a court, that the money or assets were not gained or used illegally, or if they were, that he had no knowledge of it. This kind of convictionless seizure came into vogue at a federal level in the early 80s, and it has now been mimicked at a local level by nearly every single state in the country. The public outcry for a war on drugs, and now the even more generalized war on crime, currently focusing on guns, has made these laws quite popular with prosecutors. It's popular because the money and goods seized are funneled back to the police departments, making a bonanza out of law enforcement. Prosecutors also like the law because it shifts the burden of proof to the suspect, or to any third party with an interest in the property, so it is easier to keep seized assets. Forfeiture laws represent little more than a money grab that results from the erosion and elimination of a citizen's right to due process, the Fifth Amendment's protection against self-incrimination, and the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable search and seizure. Spouses of criminal suspects now find themselves suddenly penniless and homeless. Roommates or business partners lose everything they have invested jointly with a criminal suspect. Theoretically, every resident in a condominium complex could lose his property if just one resident is suspected of criminal behavior. Suspected, not arrested or convicted. Yes, it flies in the face of our supposed innocent until proven guilty ethos. After all, due process can be difficult. The broad language of the laws has also allowed police to confiscate an entire video store by alleging an obscene tape had been rented there. The store is then out of business, and the owners deprived of a livelihood. Being accused of a misdemeanor can ruin you as the state plunders its own citizens. You don't have to be a crime kingpin. You don't even have to do anything wrong. Even the American Civil Liberties Union, which has rallied against federal RICO laws as heinous beyond description, has itself been seduced by the power of these laws. Using the criminal version of the RICO statute, it has sought prosecution against abortion protesters who block abortion clinics, charging them with, quote-unquote, a pattern of racketeering. The state can confiscate a suspect's money and property based on mere suspicion. An informant's anonymous tip is enough to launch an extensive investigation, resulting in permanent confiscation of property, even if the case is thrown out of court or the defendant is acquitted of the crime. Yes, it's unconstitutional to deprive someone of life, liberty, or property without due process. But this nitpicking point is taken care of by a legal doctrine known as, quote-unquote, relation back, which says that property instantly reverts back to the state once it's been used for illegal purposes. This view changes the proceedings from criminal to civil, leading to an Alice in Wonderland world where the thing is guilty of the crime. You'll see cases such as State of Arizona versus a 1965 Mustang convertible, or State of Arizona versus $25,000 in cash. The state uses the laws as a de facto form of punishment. The state essentially allows defendants to buy their way out of prison time, or use the laws as a way to levy fines without even going to trial. Surveillance. Because of this supermarket spree the cops have developed, they have put more and more effort into getting people to spy on each other. You may find yourself entangled in the justice system simply because somebody got pissed off at you and phoned in a hot tip. So, the cops get a hot tip that you're doing something wrong. That'll subject you to forfeiture. Then, they can request a mail cover and have the post office photocopy your mail. They can find out where you bank, and they can find out if you own property. If you divert your mail to somebody else, they'll just search their mail, and they will find you, and watch you, and follow you around, all on an anonymous tip. Now, what ends up happening is, when you start watching a perfectly honest citizen long enough, and hard enough, you'll start to develop probable cause for search warrants. Then you can get financial search warrants, and you can go into people's bank records, and go inside safety deposit boxes, and all kinds of stuff. And that person never knows. You can't find out about it unless you write away to the government under the Freedom of Information Act and request your records. The kicker? The federal government is the only one subject to the FOIA, and if the stuff's under seal, the court won't tell you it exists. That means the federal magistrate has said that you're the target of an investigation, and in order to permit the government to conduct its investigation, they won't tell you that you're under investigation. If anybody in the government told you, they'd get in the deepest, darkest trouble they've ever been in their entire lives. As an investigation progresses, it gains momentum, and has to justify itself. Any investigation done out of malice is abuse of process, and therefore illegal. But by the time a target of an investigation finds out about it, it's too late. And once probable cause has been developed for a criminal violation, there is nothing to stop the investigation from intensifying. They can bring you in front of a grand jury where you're not entitled to a lawyer and question the hell out of you. And if you answer the first question, then you can't even take the fifth. It's dreadful. They could put you through a ringer you could not withstand. Quote-unquote, accidentally. State and federal legislatures have consistently strengthened and broadened these laws, extending the amount of time the state can hold a seized asset before going to court, and eliminating rules that forced the police to sell much of the seized property. Now, the state has 3 years to use whatever it seizes. Then it can sell it. Just in case you were ever wondering how it is you got this far into the machine. Probation. After the trial, should you be found guilty, you get one last crack at saving yourself some pain. Between the trial and sentencing, you'll be confronted with a probation officer, or some other similar court employee who will interview you. From this interview, he'll compile a recommendation, sometimes called a pre-sentence report, that the judge is supposed to read before you get sentenced. Your probation officer can undo much of the damage done so far. He can also make things a lot worse for you, so you must lay it on thick and heavy during the interview. Should there be anything incorrect or improper in the report, make sure your attorney objects to it as soon as possible. You have the right to be sentenced based on correct and accurate information. Jail behavior is also considered at the sentencing. Same goes for the old military record, community ties, and remorse song and dance. They may also have negative things such as hearsay from enemies. Make sure to correct that. Even though you're sure to go to jail or prison by now, the sentencing is where it's made official, and it all gets spelled out. It is a crucial time, to say the least. Most of the time, a judge will go by the recommendation he receives. In fact, it is the probation officer, not the judge, who has the most say-so over what happens to you. That means you may be able to have a new trial right then and there. It's important not to get caught lying to the probation officer, but in no way should you tell, quote-unquote, the truth. When speaking of your criminal history, make sure to separate yourself from the past as much as possible, and in every possible way, you must downplay any gains you made from crime. The parole officer doesn't want to hear any tales of the good life you lived while robbing houses or selling lateral. In fact, a good citizen going bad can be written down as a reason to give you an even harsher sentence. It's not a legal reason to enhance your sentence, but you'd better get it out of there before the judge sees it. If your lawyer won't do it, then write him a letter insisting that he do it, and send it to him certified mail. Documentation is everything in an appeal. If possible, suggest that you were forced into the crime, that you never would have done this except for some circumstance beyond your control. In fact, everything about your crime has to be beyond your control. If you come off looking like a key underworld figure, you'll be punished for it. If possible, suggest that somebody made you do it by threatening you into it. Otherwise, maybe you did your crime because your baby was starving, or for some other misguided but noble reason. It isn't necessarily a bad idea to blame part of the crime on being drunk or otherwise intoxicated, but do not blame it on chronic drinking or drug taking. This not only will not be seen as an excuse, it may make it worse. Certainly from then on, you'll be known as an alcoholic or drug addict, and be less likely to get parole or other breaks. It may also subject you to a narrower range of prison conditions if you get pegged as a problem prisoner even before you're locked up. But own up to the crime. Let the judge know you are ultimately responsible for what you do. In federal law, this acceptance of responsibility is even codified, providing for a 2-level reduction in offense classification. So, you are the only one responsible, and you are sorry. You are very sorry. Your words must drip with remorse. This is by far the most important thing. You must be sorry for what you did. You did it, and you're sorry. Sometimes, a judge will go bananas over something, ignore the pre-sentence report, and, out of sheer abuse of power, send you away for an extra 20 years. Even if you're able to get the sentence overturned, you're still looking at a hell of a lot of work, and not much success. A good example of someone who pissed off a judge is Jim Hogshire, who got more than 40 years for crimes anyone else wouldn't get 10 for. Luckily, the judge blew it by taking a moment to lecture the quote-unquote disgraced preacher on how much he considered Hogshire an asshole. Hogshire's lawyers were able to use that to get him released about 30 years early, but not until after Hogshire had served a lot of time with that sentence hanging over his head. So plenty still rests in the judge's hands. Unless he is restrained by sentencing guidelines, he can make you serve sentences concurrently, or one after the other. He can find you a habitual criminal and invoke sentence enhancements that will add long years to your time, or maybe give you life. He can sentence you to flat time, in which you must do a fixed sentence, or he can give you an indeterminate sentence, the famous 2 to 25 years. The good thing about such a sentence is that it may be possible, it varies from state to state, to start going before the parole board after only 2 years, unless there is a mandatory minimum. On the other hand, you may have to do the whole 25 years. You may not even get a chance to get out early, since the judge could just pick a number between 2 and 25 and give you that as flat time. It's impossible to recommend which state is quote-unquote better than another for any given crime here, as there are so many variations between states, and laws are changed and enforced so capriciously. In general, however, for drug crimes, the state penalties are lighter than the federal penalties. Of course, most crimes are still state crimes, and you won't have much of a choice between state or federal prosecution. But don't worry, The federal government is taking long strides to usurp this, and soon every crime can be a federal crime. The sentencing laws in states vary quite a lot, and the same crime in one state that gets you 4 to 8 years may bring you a flat 20 in another. Some states don't have parole at all, but do have what's called, quote-unquote, good time, meaning you get a certain amount of time off your sentence for each day you, quote-unquote, behave. In general, it is wiser to reduce the range of sentencing. 10 years flat is better than 2 to 25. Sure, you might get out earlier with the second sentence, but probably not. It is more probable that you'll get the whole 25. None of these sentencing schemes contain even the tiniest loophole, and all of them have some horrifying drawbacks. For instance, any low-paid guard can destroy your chances of good time, thus effectively taking control of your sentence once you're in prison. All he has to do is accuse you of any kind of infraction, and you will be punished immediately. Along with whatever punishment you get, the whole, for instance, comes a reduction in time class and more time on the end of your sentence. But you're not incarcerated yet. Right now, you still have a chance at that fun carnival known as the trial. Put on your party hat. The trial. Your first decision on a trial is whether you want to be tried by a judge or a jury. Common wisdom says that you should go before a judge if you've got the facts, and before a jury if not. This is true to a certain extent, but when your life is at stake, it's wise to consider the matter more deeply. A lot of prisoners have 13.5 tattooed on their hands or arms, which stands for 12 jurors, 1 judge, and a half-assed chance. At a jury trial, you have only to convince one person you're innocent to get a hung jury. At that point, the state has to try you again, or let you go. If you get another hung jury, the likelihood is that they'll just drop the charges, but keep the threat of rearrest over your head, to avoid wasting more money and time and looking like fools. Or else, the prosecutor may offer you a really sweet plea bargain. On the other hand, if you go for a bench trial, judge, he or she is going to come to a decision. From there, that person decides how to punish you. Your fate rests entirely with a person you have never met before. The only good thing about a bench trial is that if you're found guilty, the state may not be as pissed off at you, since bench trials are cheaper and give you less time. It may also be to your advantage to go before a judge if you're charged with a crime that is repugnant to the community. That means, if you're charged with pimping, go to a judge. But if it's assault and you can show how the whole thing resulted from some kind of ongoing feud, a jury is more inclined to show mercy. Child abuse? Judge. Wife beating? Jury. Etc. Statistically, for all crimes, juries are 50% more likely to acquit than a judge. You have a better chance of getting off with a jury. If you want a knee-jerk choice, go with the jury. In any case, it's time to reevaluate your lawyer. For a trial, you want a litigator. That is, someone whose job includes a lot of actual arguing in court. Large law firms often employ guys whose only job is to argue the case in court. They don't do a lot of research or develop a case, as much as they use their skills in persuasion. Litigators are guys who can think on their feet, make quick and accurate guesses as to where the prosecutor is going, and stay aware of their surroundings. They should also be able to discredit or otherwise destroy any of the state's evidence against you, or any of their witnesses. Your defense attorney is likely also going to be a litigator, but make sure of this. It may be that he has a partner who does the actual litigating just because he's better at it. This is one place where TV bullshit has some truth to it. Perry Mason did a lot for his clients with his courtroom antics. Your lawyer can too. It is a colossal mistake to have an inexperienced litigator argue on your behalf. Mike Tyson, once incarcerated for rape, made this mistake. Tyson not only used a lawyer inexperienced in criminal law, he also chose a man who had not argued a case in public for years. The importance of having a good litigator was made doubly clear in the Tyson case, when the state of Indiana hired a private outside attorney to argue the government's case. Even though they had recourse to any number of ruthless and experienced litigators in the prosecutor's office, they wanted to make sure they won. And they did. Even though juries are safer than judges, they are not automatically sympathetic. Bear in mind that a jury trial means you will be watched by 12 of the squarest people within 100 miles. These are the people who couldn't think of a reason to avoid jury duty. These people have demonstrated to the satisfaction of at least 2 opposing lawyers and a judge that they have no real opinions on anything. They are people who have an abiding respect for authority. Dullards at best, reactionaries at worst. They are going to watch you for the slightest sign that you did it. They believe everything the judge says, and they are going to either punish you or set you free on essentially the same basis as they vote for politicians. And damn near anything can convict you. You must not swagger, nor must you trudge along. Though you have the right to remain silent, that is generally interpreted as a sign of guilt, and when you testify, you will lose if your testimony isn't seamless or if the prosecutor is able to rattle you. Be humble. Don't assume you can sit there scowling or digging in your nose while your lawyer fixes everything. Guys like John Gotti, Mr. Swagger, or Mike Tyson, Mr. Smug, are examples of bad jury performances. Jury tax. There is, really and truly, a jury tax. That is, you will get a harsher sentence if you make the state go through a jury trial to find you guilty. This is not written down anywhere, and nobody will admit to it publicly. But sometimes this jury tax is so explicit, judges have been known to call defense attorneys to their chambers just before the first day of the trial and threaten to give the defendant twice as much time if he is found guilty. Even after you get taxed by the judge, you may find that the sheriff or the warden or whoever is in charge of your carcass while incarcerated simply has a policy of not honoring good time accrued by defendants convicted by a jury. Some authorities are not even shy about writing this down as a reason to keep you in jail when they could let you go. Nope, it's not constitutional, but it'll be a long, tough fight to win, if you can prove your case. The pressure here is immense, to say the least. Don't look back. Whatever avenue you take, especially in a jury trial, you've got to stick with it and never look back. This will take balls, as there are going to be lots of moments you'll feel like breaking down. But don't. You must play this out to the end. Behave yourself in court, and project a positive attitude that a jury can admire or identify with. You must appear to be the good guy, and at the same time, you must appear to be just like them. People don't send themselves to jail, after all. This may explain why John Gotti was able to win all of his acquittals in the past with his super confident, expensive tailor suit look. Maybe the jury just drooled to be like him. Maybe the last time he seemed too self-assured. It's true, for instance, that it's a real bitch to go after a movie star in either a criminal or civil suit because of the jury's natural star-worshipping tendencies. Burl Ives could be videotaped sodomizing a boys' choir, and he'd walk. That's another good reason to bring on the charismatic character witness. If you can link yourself with beloved personalities, they will compare you favorably against the prosecution. Church and business figures are good people to have speak up on your behalf. Needless to say, keep your cool. Never stand up and declare this or that witness a liar. Don't fall asleep, fart, groan, or do anything but pay attention. If your crime includes a coroner describing the badly mangled body of a young girl found by the riverside, don't get too emotional. Just show some disgust, like any right-thinking person would. Once again, concern and worry are your only valid emotions. It's generally a good idea to testify on your own behalf. Silence means you're guilty to a jury, and it's hard to imagine any good reason to stay away from the stand. Even if you have a voice like fingernails on a chalkboard, or a whopping case of Tourette's syndrome, the jury wants to hear you say, "I didn't do it." You get up there and say it. The prosecutor might make you look horrible, but that's his job. Yours is to get the hell out of there with an acquittal. Mistrial. A guy in Florida realized his jury trial was not going the way he wanted it to, and decided it was a lost cause. His only hope, he thought, was to get a mistrial and start from scratch. To this end, he simply waited for the correct moment, then punched his own lawyer in the mouth as hard as he could. The lawyer was knocked out of his chair, and there was blood and commotion. The judge screamed at the guy that he was still going to sentence him, etc., etc. But our hero sat there passively. He knew the trial was no good. It was a mistrial, and he was entitled to another one. Normally, there's not a lot of advantage in a mistrial, as it almost always results in another trial, at which the same judge is likely to start influencing things more than usual, either to make sure that doesn't happen again, or to punish you if you pull a stunt like the one mentioned above. Still, it is a legitimate delaying tactic, and can be considered. Getting a mistrial, like filing a cascade of motions, objecting to everything and countersuing, buys more time. In some cases, this may be your best hope. It is possible to outwait the prosecution. As time passes, the state may become more amenable to a deal. Your case may fade from public view. Key witnesses against you may get sick of constantly having to come long distances to re-testify. Hell, key witnesses may even die. There is something to be said for dragging out your case as long as possible, though you should make sure you have the funds to do this. You may need quite a lot. After all, the state has almost unlimited resources. Matching them dollar for dollar could be a losing proposition. The jury. There is a lot of speculation on who is good to have on a jury. Blacks are supposedly less willing to vote guilty. So are quote-unquote liberals, bikers, and others who may have suffered at the hands of authority. Young women are thought to be some of the harshest, most reactionary of people to have judging you. So are victims of crime, military guys, and cops. In reality, the jury is a very local phenomenon, and although there is a degree of truth to some of the above beliefs, they might vary a lot from community to community. Once again, this is why you must have a local attorney who knows all the neighborhoods and probable backgrounds of potential jurors. He or she should ask each a bunch of questions designed to figure out what sort of prejudices each one actually has. Each attorney is allowed to disqualify a certain number of jurors without stating any reason at all. Use these when something in your gut says no. All other exclusions must be for a reason the judge agrees with. FIJA. The Fully Informed Jury Amendment, or Association, FIJA, is one break you still have left to get out of the machine without being ground into a fine mush. It has gained popularity over the years and scares the hell out of cops. It is the jury's right to find a defendant not guilty of breaking a law if the jury does not believe the law itself is just. Judges will tell you differently, but it is true. Even if the defendant clearly has done all of the things the prosecution alleges, the jury can still vote to acquit if they think the circumstances warrant it, or if they simply disagree with the law. Quote-unquote jury nullification, as it is known, is the jury's right and duty to judge the facts of a case as well as the law itself. It is the reason a little more than 50% of people accused of violating prohibition laws were set free. Juries simply did not agree that a man who had alcohol should go to prison. Time and again, authorities, including judges, at every level of government, have sought to prevent the dissemination of jury power literature, even in those states where the fully informed jury information is required as part of the instructions the judge is supposed to read to the jury. In states where the fully informed jury amendment has become law, the intent of the law is effectively thwarted by the judge himself. Typically he or she will rant on and on about how the jury must take a narrow view of the facts, how they must not form opinions based on anything but what they have heard in the trial. They also very often tell them that they are required to follow the judge's instructions only. Then, to comply with the law, they mumble a legalistic phrase at the end of their 2-hour harangue that, translated, means, "Oh, by the way, half of what I just told you isn't true." The jury is not only empowered, but required to judge the law itself in each case. Judges have also repeatedly refused to allow attorneys to speak of the jury's right to consult their own consciences when considering whether or not somebody is guilty of a crime. They are frequently unaware of the severity of the punishment the accused is facing, and are even told at times, "Don't worry, this guy is going to get off light," when that's not true. In short, judicial tampering with the jury is what leads jury members to express regret right after a trial, saying things like, "I didn't think he did anything wrong, and we, didn't want to find him guilty, but the judge said." If you are on a jury and you feel the slightest pang about a guilty sentence, you must go in the direction of mercy. In fact, that's the only direction a jury can take. Juries can only show mercy, not heap on punishment. There's a reason for that, and it's called justice. Seems a lot of judges are unfamiliar with the process and concept. If you are accused of a crime you believe most of your peers think is stupid, or you believe they would acquit you for no other reason than the punishment is out of line with the crime, you need to inform the jury of this right. This is not always easy to do. It will be easier to inform the jury of its true powers if you plan ahead by contacting FIJA beforehand. If you must wait till the shit hits the fan, you should still call them at 1-800-TELL-JURY. With their help, it may be possible to contaminate potential jurors with this information. Escape. Escape is an option at any point along the path to the electric chair, although it becomes progressively more difficult to escape as you are sucked into the machine. Your first chance to bug out is while you're being arrested or pursued. Then, of course, you can jump bail. Once you get to prison, it becomes a lot harder to get away. But it can be done. There's even been one successful escape from death row. But that guy, like so many others, was eventually apprehended. The fact is, most people who attempt to escape prison succeed in their initial escape. Then, most escapees are caught fairly quickly, usually within a couple miles of the prison. This is mainly due to incredible stupidity. A man will spend every waking moment scheming and fine-tuning a brilliant escape, only to be apprehended the next morning at his girlfriend's house. Sometimes, guys are nailed just sort of hiding out in nearby shrubland, clueless as to what to do with their newfound freedom. Because there are many methods of escape, I will leave it up to the individual to figure out when and how to effect an escape. But keep in mind that once you wriggle away from the man, you still exist, and will have to be somewhere. If you don't want to go back to prison and get even more time for the escape attempt, you must vow to run far and fast, and never, never come back. In Steal This Book, Abby Hoffman wrote of the isolation of going underground, and stressed the determination one must have to remain at large. Then, he proved his own theories a few years later, when he disappeared. He returned to the public eye at a time of his own choosing, a time when his political enemies were gone, and the public had nearly forgotten him. Abby is an object lesson to anyone who decides to make a break. You must disappear completely, and probably forever. One reasonable thing to do is to hide out in an area where authorities are not likely to look for you, and, if they did, would not have much chance of finding you. If you can go it alone in the mountains, then head for the hills. Not only will you be left alone for the most part, but you might even gain the upper hand over your pursuers should they continue to chase you. The main thing is to get away from the cops' turf and into a place where you have an advantage. Pick a place you like the place you pick. The famous French escape artist portrayed in the book Papillon was able to get away from some of the most bestial conditions anyone could imagine in South America's French Guiana. At one point, he lived for years with an Indian tribe, where he ate well, slept well, and had at least 2 wives, and gained the respect of the tribe. There in the jungle and on the beach, he was invulnerable. No French authority would dare hunt for him in such hostile territory, and the Indians would help defend him. Eventually, he left this idyllic life for stupid reasons. Revenge mainly, and ended up back in hell. If you find yourself in such a situation, don't be a fool. Don't come back. Instead, stretch out on the beach and enjoy your freedom. Leave the old world behind, physically and mentally. Remember what happened to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, although they had the right idea by going overseas. Extradition. Hiding in a foreign country has the immediate advantage of very clearly leaving the jurisdiction of your pursuers. In fact, if they find out you're somewhere in Bolivia, they might just forget you. Depending on the charge, it may simply not be worth it to try and catch you. If they only know you left the country, then hell, they probably will forget you. Roman Polanski has nicely evaded a nasty bout of incarceration by this method, and you can too. Just be prepared. A couple of terms to become familiar with before hitting the road are quote-unquote extradition and quote-unquote the doctrine of comity. Extradition treaties are agreements countries have to send back each other's bad guys, even if they don't personally have a beef with them. You are shit out of luck for the most part in these countries. These treaties are common, and can even form a daisy chain that will keep you visiting prisons around the globe for centuries. Some of the nicest countries have these treaties. So, in the words of the U.S. Customs, it's best to know before you go. But don't give up hope. Lots of places are quite loath to enforce U.S. policies they don't agree with, and will drag their feet when tracking you down. This is how U.S. draft dodgers and Army deserters managed to stay in Canada for so long. In fact, by running away and staying away long enough, they were eventually granted amnesty, while their stateside counterparts went to jail or war. The Canadian government didn't agree with the U.S. war in Vietnam, and one way they showed it was by leaving the draft dodgers alone. Same thing happened in Sweden. Cubans running to America get practically automatic citizenship, no matter what they did in Cuba. For a long time, Algeria was home to Eldridge Cleaver because they perceived him a political ally. Another example is Germany, which doesn't like to export criminals facing the death penalty, although they'll play along with just about everything else. Israel has protected Jews just because they're Jews. Brazil won't extradite the father of a Brazilian baby. The key to choosing which country to run to is to find one with a common interest. Comity is basically an agreement between all countries to allow each other's judges all around the world to slap each other on the back and to tell each other how right they are. So, even in a country with no explicit extradition treaty, you may find yourself sent home to jail. An example of this doctrine of comity at work is seen in airline hijackings. Air hijacking is considered a crime all over the world, and normally hijackers get sent back to the States, or to prison right there, even if the country is at odds with the United States. About the only exception to this is, once again, Cubans coming to the States. Wherever you go, it is important to be on your best behavior. This is where Butch and Sundance slipped up and went down in a hail of Bolivian bullets. Keep a low profile to increase your chances of living a carefree life. This means not committing any more crimes while you're there. It means asking not what that country can do for you, but what you can do for that country. Bring lots of money. Everybody is friendlier the richer you are. Bank robbers often have plenty of coin, and thus can induce banana republics, which might otherwise throw them out like a dirty diaper, to harbor them in comfort. At least until the money runs out. Becoming a citizen can help too, but you're still at the mercy of politics, as former Nazis have found out from time to time, even after being protected for decades. And think of the spies who defected to the Soviet Union. Where are they now? Again, in running overseas, choose your destination carefully, and don't count on luxury when you get there, even if the country hates the United States. Just check out all those hijackers from the 1960s who fled to Cuba, only to remain there to this day, cranking out license plates.
But what happened to the hero? Is there anyone who helped? Well, just download Fallout 0 and then see for yourself.